From the studios of Clean Fuels Alliance America, this is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Fascinating ideas and conversations in the world of biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. Now, here's your host, Scott Tremaine.
And welcome. This week, Scott Fenwick, Technical Director at Clean Fuels, sits down with Adam Buttgenbach, Director of Fleet Engineering and Sustainability with PepsiCo, to explore PepsiCo's ambitious journey to decarbonize one of North America's largest private fleets.
Thanks, Scott. Adam, it's great to have you with us this week. Thanks for taking time to join me and join our listeners today. You've got a pretty big schedule coming up here in the next week.
Yes, we have a couple big events coming up this week, or in a couple of weeks, with the Farm Progress Show. So really want to thank you for including me here today. Excited to be on the show and share with some of the work we've been doing.
Absolutely. We're excited to be partnered with Pepsi. Many people may not know that Pepsi is a member of Clean Fuels Alliance America.
Yep.
We're excited to share some space in Boone, Iowa at Farm Progress Show next week. And so anxious to share your message, our message, because it really is one and the same. And so, Adam, tell us, what your title is with Pepsi and what your role is within the organization.
Thank you, Scott. So I lead our North American Fleet Center of Excellence. So really focused on the fleet strategy and decarbonization strategy for transportation logistics for PepsiCo here in North America. So that's going to include our two biggest business units, Frito-Lay North America, as well as Pepsi Beverages North America. And we're really focused on what is the future of mobility for our organization. How do we move goods throughout our supply chain? And how do we do so in a more sustainable manner that allows us to be able to stay competitive and deliver our products in the future?
And so between Pepsi, Frito-Lay, those are two huge household name brands. Mm-hmm. And so this is more than just, obviously there's a business component to this, but there are brand reputations at stake. And so when Pepsi and yourself are talking to your shareholders and to the public, about carbon reduction goals, those thoughts, those desires, that business plan has meaning in the marketplace.
Yes, absolutely. So in 2021, when we were thinking about the future, we really wanted to establish what that would look like for us. And so in 2021, we launched PepsiCo Positive, which is our strategic transformation focused on how we're going to grow and create value throughout our organization. And it really comes down to three key pillars for us. They're positive agriculture, having a positive value chain, and then positive choices within our products. And so when we look specifically within that value chain, it's really focused on a true net zero future by 2040 for our supply chain, but also a low carbon future, and how do we start making progress today? So when we look at things like our supply chain, transportation, logistics, it's how do we start to incorporate some of these newer technologies, low carbon energies into our operations and start having an impact on our business.
Hence, kind of why Pepsi's going to be at Farm Progress Show. That explains a lot, and how an organization like Clean Fuels Alliance America can play a role in the efforts of Pepsi towards decarbonization, towards low carbon fuels, and the impacts those will have on your business. And so a lot of people, hear a lot of terms in the marketplace and reading headlines today. A lot of acronyms get thrown out. ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Tell us what that means within Pepsi, your carbon reduction goals that you guys published as part of your Pep Positive movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, those ESG goals are really a part of our PepsiCo Positive strategy. And so for where we're focused on our supply chain, with transportation, with fleet assets, it's really on getting to that net zero emissions by 2040. And how do we start making progress towards that goal? We have a scope 1 and 2 goal, which we've already made significant progress on. We've had a 13% reduction in our scope 1 and 2 emissions from last year, and a 5% reduction in our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions from a year ago as well. So when we look at all those emissions that make up our own private fleet operations, as well as our third parties. We're looking for solutions, and we're starting to deploy solutions that help us reduce the emissions associated with our vehicles, but then also solutions that can help our suppliers, our third-party for-hire carriers, and others also follow a similar path of decarbonizing their operations as well.
And so that's interesting. Let's talk specifically about the PepsiCo and Frito-Lay fleets initially. You've got a lot of trucks and a lot of pieces of machines out there.
Yes, we do. So at PepsiCo, we're one of the largest food and beverage companies in the world, which means we operate one of the largest private fleets here in North America with a little over 80,000 assets total. In addition, when we look at those 80,000 assets, it's a very diverse group of equipment and operations that we operate them in. So we operate everything from Class 8 tractor trailers to box trucks to service trucks to delivery vans to cars and pickups. We operate these vehicles on a wide variety of solutions, that whether they're gas-powered, diesel-powered, they're powered by renewable natural gas, propane, biodiesel, renewable diesel, electricity. And then we use all these vehicles in a variety of different ways. Some of these vehicles might be material handling equipment that stays within a warehouse, or a yard tractor that moves trailers across a yard for us. We have some vehicles that do last mile direct store delivery. And so we'll deliver our products from some of our distribution centers direct to a grocery store or a convenience store in the market. And then we have a large portion of assets that operate in an over-the-road application that run 24/7, 365 days a year, that go from our plant manufacturing to our distribution centers that are typically tractor trailers, fully loaded, and running in very challenging conditions. And so we see a little bit of everything when we look across our fleet. And so for us, we've never had a single solution when it comes to operating our supply chain and delivering our assets. It's always been made up by multiple solutions. And so as we explore some of these new technologies and new solutions going into the future, we're experimenting with a lot of different technologies, whether it's growing one of the largest compressed natural gas fleets in North America here with a little over 700 assets that are being operated primarily on renewable natural gas, whether it's incorporating renewable diesel in a lot of the West Coast markets where there's an LCFS program, making them more competitive and making the availability a little bit better, whether it's a biodiesel application in the Midwest, where we have access to biodiesel at a competitive price with good availability as well, or whether it's EVs in certain applications where those make sense and they're competitive, and they help deliver a zero emission solution as well as a well-to-wheel zero emission solution when we power those with renewable electricity.
So as a lot of fleets out there in the marketplace are looking to consolidate and narrow their choices, you guys are looking to expand more and more solutions that you're putting into place every day. With each of those, and I imagine each one has a place, each one is a solution for certain applications, certain geographies, certain seasons, maybe even so. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing? And let's start with biodiesel and renewable diesel.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. So when we do look at it holistically at our fleet, even before we started focusing on low carbon solutions, it's never been a one size fits all. It's always been tailoring the best solution to the application. And that's what we're doing as we go to decarbonize as well. So when we look at things like renewable diesel and biodiesel, renewable diesel has been a really good solution for us. It's been a direct drop-in solution where we've had to have zero modifications to our vehicle. We've been able to put it in the vehicle. Drivers don't notice any loss in performance, any loss in fuel economy. We actually think some of the characteristics, when you look at some of the particulate matter from the fuel, could actually have a positive impact on the emission system on the vehicle and also help improve our fuel economy as well. So not only are we switching to a solution that when we look at it on the life cycle analysis of the carbon intensity of that fuel, not only are we getting a carbon reduction from using renewable diesel, but it's also giving us an improved maintenance performance on our vehicles as well. So we've had really good luck. We've been running renewable diesel on the West Coast now for over 3 years. We've leveraged over 2 million gallons of renewable diesel in our existing fleet and running up to a blend of about R99. So really almost a true 100% biogenic fuel in those assets. And then with biodiesel, pretty similar case. Both biofuels starting from the similar feedstocks. So typically your used cooking oils, your animal fats and tallows, and then your waste agricultural products as well. Leveraging those feedstocks, going through a different refining process to create biodiesel versus renewable diesel. But we've had good luck with biodiesel in our existing fleet. We were able to partner with a company called Optimus, which addressed some of the historic concerns that we've had around biodiesel, particularly with cold flow, the ability for a vehicle to properly operate, whether it's going through a regen process or not, how it handles startup and shutdown. Their system really allows us to continue to run our fleet the way we do today, but running on B99 instead of having to run on traditional diesel or only being able to run on renewable diesel. And we found in a lot of locations the availability of a B99 being much better as well as more cost competitive than something like a renewable diesel that's outside of those LCFS markets. So we are now live with 2 of our manufacturing locations where we do a lot of our over-the-road transportation in Topeka, Kansas, as well as Beloit, Wisconsin. We now have over 50 assets that are operating on up to B100 biodiesel, running every day in our fleet. The overall performance on the biodiesel feedback has been very good. The drivers have noticed little, if any, change. We see fuel economy continuing to be competitive. We haven't seen a change in maintenance as well. So we don't have quite as much data as we do on renewable diesel, but so far the results have been very positive. And we've been able to leverage over 250,000 gallons so far this year in those 2 sites. So continuing to scale up and grow the amount of traditional fossil-based diesel that we're able to offset with these biogenic fuels.
Well, that's great to hear because most fleets, and we want to try and be honest and share any data that Clean Fuels has with as many fleets, and decision makers as possible. Most people are looking at just B20 and they think that there's some sort of blend wall and limit that they can't go above B20. B20 is not an option for you, for Pepsi. I mean, it literally is B99, B100 or bust in arguably some of your toughest operations.
That's correct. So we don't want to discourage anyone from making progress because we do think, progress over perfection is important. It's important to take that first step. And we're still doing a lot of things, whether it's incremental, reducing empty miles, improving efficiency. But you are correct. For us, we are looking at making bigger impacts and goals. And so we have tried and looked at B20 in the past. I know from a reputation on quality in the past, there's been some challenges with B20. In working with the Clean Fuel Alliance of America, we've really better understood the improvements in the quality of biodiesel over the past decade. And that's part of the reason why we feel much more comfortable with it now than we did historically. But now when we do look at where we are and where we want to go, B20 for us doesn't get us where we want to go by 2030 or by 2040. And so we do need those higher blends. And we've had really good luck with the renewable diesel side up to an R99. The biodiesel side, the biodiesel at a B99 was always a little bit of a question. And so that's why we started out with doing 10 trucks at first, doing a small scale pilot. But as we really focused in on an application that was hard for us to decarbonize, where we needed the fuel, we actually felt like an over-the-road application for long distances, consistent speeds, is where that fuel would perform really well. And so far, the results have been really good. So for us, we are looking to make those bigger impacts where we can. And we feel like this is an application where that B99 does allow us to maintain the operational capability that we need for our business and have a larger impact on reducing our emissions.
So you've mentioned some long-term goals that Pepsi has as well. And so you're not slowing down, pun intended. You're looking to expand those operations and using more and more of these solutions in the coming years as well, correct?
That's correct. So we'll continue to upfit a lot of our over-the-road diesel tractors with Optimus, which gives us the ability to run on a traditional ULSD petroleum fuel or B99 if it's available. And so really what that technology does is by upfitting tractors with it, it allows us to run on regular diesel if that's all that's available. It allows us to run on renewable diesel if that's available. And then it also allows us to run on B99 or B100 if that's available too. So we view that solution as an unlock to be able to run more fuels instead of fewer options. And then we looked for future opportunity of where can we expand fuel availability and infrastructure. When we look at the market holistically, there's a lot of biodiesel in the market that gets blended in across the country. And so it's getting access to that biodiesel, not at a B5 or B10 or B20 level, but at a much higher B99 level. And so our hope is that we will have greater expansion of that availability of fuel that we have access to. And so we're continuing to upfit a lot of our equipment to be able to handle that fuel as we see it become more available. And so by the end of this year, we do expect to have a couple hundred additional trucks that are upfit with Optimus and that will be available, will have the ability to run on B99 or B100 as it becomes available.
Well, with the size of your fleet, that's a lot of purchasing power. But you've mentioned an all of the above approach. And so tell me, just give us a little bit of scale here. You mentioned battery electric trucks as well. And I know Pepsi has some of those. What sort of operations are those at? And how are you utilizing that as a solution?
That's a great question. And so we are doing a lot of battery electric vehicles. We've been investing in deploying battery electric vehicles for over a decade in a commercial vehicle application. And so we've had a lot of time to learn a lot and better understand the technology and where it fits. We're definitely, big fans of battery electric vehicles from being a zero emission vehicle, zero tailpipe emission vehicle. And when we pair that with renewable electricity, getting that true life cycle zero emission impact as well. But when we look at where we operate our private fleet, the two largest operations that we have for our owned assets is going to be in our last mile distribution, which is the vast majority of our assets, and then our over-the-road vehicles as well. Now, when we look at our last mile, really we're focusing in on a lot of EVs there. For Frito-Lay, we announced in 2023, we deployed over 700 EVs. So a lot of EV route trucks for us, a lot of EV pickups, a lot of EV yard tractors that fit that duty cycle really well, which for us, that last mile direct store delivery is typically less than 100 miles a day, typically less than a 12-hour operation, and a return to base operation. So those vehicles have the opportunity to sit at one of our distribution centers for 12 hours or longer to charge. They then go into the market and work, typically driving less than 100 miles, and then return back to base. And so when we look at that, the capability of the technology, it fits that duty cycle really, really well. And arguably, I think that's one of the most challenging for the internal combustion engine is that constant stop and go in traffic, very urban environments. And that's where battery electric does really well. And so that's why we focus so much in that application. And then when we get into the over-the-road side of the business, that is typically a much longer duty cycle where vehicles might do a couple hundred miles in a day or longer than that. Typically very payload or capacity sensitive, slip seat operations, so not a whole lot of time in between operations. And we are testing to see where battery electric vehicles can get into that space a little bit. But it is much more challenging with having enough infrastructure, having purpose-built EVs that can charge at a much faster speed than what we've traditionally seen so far. So we are trying to expand a little bit into there, but we are leveraging biofuels and renewable fuels to go along with that. So when we look at our really long distance routes, do we have access to renewable natural gas? Do we have access to renewable diesel? Do we have access to biodiesel to help complement what we're doing with EVs? So it really is an all of above type solution of selecting the best technology for the best duty cycle and then pairing those together so that we can have a larger impact faster as we work towards our goals.
This is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Hi, I'm Scott Fenwick, Technical Director for Clean Fuels Alliance America. And today we're speaking with Adam Buttgenbach, Director of Fleet Engineering and Sustainability for PepsiCo. And Adam, this is timely as we prepare for the Farm Progress Show next week up in Boone, Iowa. We're talking a lot about the interaction between Pepsi, between clean fuels, and the decisions you're making and what we're making and how we can move together to advance low carbon solutions for transportation fuels and other applications out there today. So we've talked, Pepsi has a huge amount of assets in your fleet as you're distributing not just Pepsi products, but Frito-Lay products cross country, internationally, as well. And so that should provide you a lot of buying power. We've talked about how internally you guys are discussing all of the above solutions in different applications, different scenarios, different fuels, and how they meet your needs. What goes into those decisions in some of your other partners, those engine technologies that are changing just as rapidly as the fuels are?
Yeah, Scott, that's a great point and a great question. We work with the majority of the major players in the industry, as well as some startups and new entrants into the market. But we really do lean on our suppliers to help us on this journey. This isn't the first time. We've continued to focus in on driving efficiency, with our own assets, improving fuel economy. And now we're continuing to work with OEMs on evaluating additional solutions on how do we leverage the assets we already have in our fleet, because we do have a very large fleet. We don't replace that entire fleet every single year. So how can we, in addition to focusing on new technologies and new vehicles that we do deploy, how do we leverage technologies and solutions in the existing assets that we do already have in our fleet? And so we do work with a lot of those OEMs on reducing waste, whether it's extending out the oil changes in our existing vehicles, as well as how do we take technologies like Optimus and like biodiesel, and how do we incorporate those into our vehicles and make sure that we are operating them without damaging the equipment, but really pushing the limits as well as far as, kind of what the expectations and the status quo have been on the vehicles to get a little bit more life out of them, to make them a little bit more efficient. And so we've had some really good key partners. A lot of the vehicles that we've deployed so far have been on the Volvo product line, but we are working with other OEMs as well. And we do want to, bring a lot of people along with us on this journey. Having competition between suppliers, getting to that next level, I think really helps all of us evolve in the end.
Yeah, one of the things that I always talk about within Clean Fuels as we're dealing with those large vehicle and engine manufacturers, the term warranty comes up time and time again. And when we're dealing with on-road transportation fuels, differently than the railroad applications, maybe marine applications, things like that, but on and off-road applications, warranties cover the engines and they cover the parts, the workmanship. And so if there's a defect there, which again, few and far between, or somebody was asleep on a Friday afternoon and misassembled a piece, a part of the product, that's where a warranty comes in. I want to make sure you agree that warranties don't cover fuels. And so when Pepsi and Frito-Lay are out there using B100, there's a lot of discussion with your partners, as you've mentioned, with those vehicle and engine manufacturers that, hey, yes, we're above your traditional level of comfort. I'll leave it at that, your confidence level. But here's why. And you're sharing a lot of data. I mean, we're sharing data with you, with them, and I think it helps to hear it from more than one source. But you're not worried about warranties, are you?
That's a really good point. So we are always, we do want to be aware of what those warranties are, and they are important to us. But we also want to understand what they are and what they cover and what they don't cover. And I think you're exactly right. Is we run into, engine failures that have been attributed to a traditional petroleum-based fossil fuel that have then not been covered under warranty because it does go back to the fuel. And so we are aware of, the difference between, what is covered under warranty versus what is a fuel issue. And so I think it's important that we have good quality fuel. Even in fossil and petroleum-based fuel, if you don't have good quality fuel, that could lead to issues that wouldn't be covered under warranty either. Now, we have stayed very close to the work that the Clean Fuels team has done, specifically with the BQ9000 study and the improvements of biodiesel over the past decade. And that has given us a lot of confidence in what the quality of the fuel on the market is. And we feel confident if we have good quality fuel, whether it is biodiesel, renewable diesel, or traditional fossil fuel, that we can operate those, in a manner without damaging the equipment. And we are open with our OEMs, and they know what our goals are and what we're trying to accomplish. And we want to be open so that it's not a secret gotcha moment, but we want to help them come along on this journey so they can bring others with them as well. And as we get scale, hopefully these solutions become more affordable for everyone else as well.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
We've done that in the past, like with our oil change intervals. We have some oil change intervals we've pushed out to 240,000 miles.
Wow.
Which to most people would be unheard of.
Absolutely.
But we do consistent testing and sampling, and in certain applications, we found that we can maintain oil life that long. And then you look at, hey, not only are we reducing oil, which is reducing waste, but it's also a productivity benefit too. We're helping reduce our own cost. So, and we work closely with the OEMs. We share this data, and we try to help advance the industry forward. And we understand not every application can do this, but where it does make sense and where we can do it by leveraging things, whether it's an extended oil train interval, whether it's leveraging biodiesel, we are trying to push the industry forward to adopt these more sustainable solutions that we think are going to be more competitive in the long run.
And that is a great example of some of the arguments we use as well, that decisions should be data-based, and that not every solution is going to work for every fleet manager out there in the country. And so the last thing we want to see happen is somebody, we push somebody to make a decision that may not be in their best interest. But you're right. I mean, if the quality that we are stepping up to provide, and you mentioned our BQ 9000 quality reports, we just published the last year here not too long ago from the National Renewable Energy Lab. If you can use that information in conjunction with extending oil life and your oil change intervals, those are huge efficiencies that only improve your numbers and your decarbonization efforts.
That's right.
And yeah, that's a really big deal. And so really what it comes back to oftentimes is not just fuel quality, but the sample handling practices that are in place and in use by the individual fleets and users of that fuel.
Yep.
Do the OEMs understand that as well, or is it oftentimes just based upon, hey, who's your supplier and have you seen the latest C of A, certificate of analysis?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure how they look at it. I mean, I'm sure they probably do have an understanding of the differences. And for them, though, I think they've got to always plan for worst case scenario. What happens if it is a quality of fuel that wasn't produced, in the correct manner? Or what if there is a handling problem? What if it's not properly stored? What if it sits for too long? What if, whether it's a private customer with their own tank or a retailer, what if, that storage isn't properly done, and then that contributes to a problem? So I think we all want to be risk averse and take on different levels of risk. And so I think they are aware of what's out there in the market, but they've also got to protect themselves and make sure that they've got certain things in place that limit the exposure to if we do have bad actors in the market, or if we do have cases where quality isn't maintained.
Well, Pepsi has always said, and we appreciate this, progress, not perfection, because there is no perfect fuel. And I think we agree upon that. But a lot of the decisions you're making are helping to reduce your carbon footprint today, rather than waiting for the next best solution. How far out are you looking? Are you looking at alternative solutions, different alternative solutions in the next 5 years, 10 years, even further out than that?
Yes, absolutely. So we have that 2040 net zero is kind of our North Star target of where we want to be with our supply chain. So we're focusing on where do we see technologies advancing and emerging, and there might be new technologies in 2030 that don't exist today that might have a bigger influence on what we're doing today. But while we do anticipate that happening, as we do to continue to test emerging technologies, we also want to continue to make progress now and not just say, hey, we're going to sit and wait until, something happens that's going to solve all of our problems, which is what we're doing with a lot of the cases with renewable fuels. In Australia, we've got tests with fuel cell EVs. Here in the U.S., we primarily focused on battery electric, but we're also doing some renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, and biodiesel. When it comes to the energy source that we're looking at. But really when it comes to our overall decarbonization approach that we're taking with our fleet assets, there's 4 main categories that we look at. And that's network optimization. So how do we reduce empty miles? How do we, make smarter routing decisions? How do we make sure every vehicle goes out at its max cube or max payload? And we're taking full advantage of a truck that's already leaving. The next bucket is really improving efficiency. So whether it's aerodynamics, rolling resistance, lightweighting, optimizing our powertrain specs, becoming more efficient with the energy that we are using. And then the last 2 are more focused on the vehicles themselves. So taking our existing vehicles and incorporating renewable and alternative fuels, renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, biodiesel, and then incorporating new vehicles that are zero emission, whether they're battery electric vehicles being powered by renewable natural gas, or potentially fuel cell EVs that would be powered by hydrogen, hopefully green hydrogen or a low carbon hydrogen solution. For us, really understanding that well to wheels or life cycle analysis of the energy is very important when we look at both our scope 1 and scope 3 emissions.
Well, that's a great point, Adam. Based upon your discussions, Pepsi's discussions with others in the industry, your colleagues, your competitors, are there other fleets willing to make these kind of decisions? Are they willing to pay a premium for decarbonization?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we look at, we obviously have our own internal goals and we want to be a leader in this space, but being a leader in the space doesn't mean just us adopting and moving in that direction. We want to help bring our suppliers along with us. And so financially and the economics around operations is very important. We look at it when we make our decisions as well. And I know a lot of, especially the for-hire carriers, where that is their core business is transportation. The total cost of ownership and the economics around solutions is very important. And so we've worked with a lot of our key suppliers on doing some initial pilot projects at smaller scale, whether it is with low carbon hydrogen, with battery electric vehicles, with renewable diesel as well. And I think we've seen some cases even in our own fleet that we've been able to help translate over to our suppliers where we've seen cases where renewable diesel in certain markets has been less expensive than traditional petroleum-based diesel. So not only are you getting a better product at a lower price, but you're helping us meet our goals. And a lot of companies have their own internal goals as well. So really it's, in that case, it's a win-win-win solution. And so we're trying to take advantage of those type of opportunities and help scale those across where they're already competitive today versus traditional fossil-based fuels.
Yeah, and you mentioned that life cycle analysis. Clean Fuels has been fairly focused on that as well. And we've had some previous podcasts with Veronica Bradley, our Director of Environmental Sciences, talking about that, talking about reducing the carbon intensity or CI score of these fuels. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and you're going to hear a lot more messaging from Clean Fuels, is how biofuels are essential for America's farm and food security. And that messaging ties in kind of nicely with Pepsi and Frito-Lay, because you guys are involved heavily on the farm and food supply, whether it's the fuels that we've been talking about, or the food security aspect of this as well.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, at the end of the day, we're a food and beverage company. So agriculture is one of our key pillars under PepsiCo Positive that we focus in on. So whether it's regenerative practices, whether it's being water positive, and sustainable sourcing as well. Those are all very vital to our long-term goals and really our company being a food company. So understanding, where biofuels come from, making sure the feedstocks are being sustainably and responsibly sourced has a huge impact on our strategy and really guides our decision making.
So the decisions you're making and the work that we're doing on a continuing basis, I think only helps to bolster the use of biomass-based fuels because they are being sustainably sourced. And today's American farmers are growing more with less, fewer acres, but yields are expanding at such a rate that we're able to provide and hopefully keep up with your demand. As you guys continue to use more B99 and B100, we'll see about that. But it sounds like you need more of these solutions as quickly as we can help bring those to market.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. I mean, when we look at just transportation here in the U.S., and it's, I think, approximately 45 billion gallons of diesel a year, we need more solutions than fewer. When we look at the total amount of biofuels available on the market today, I think around 5 billion gallons, it's not going to be able to solve all of our problems with what we have today. And so I think we're going to need to continue to grow and sustainably and responsibly source feedstocks that can be used for biofuels as well, especially, underutilized waste streams, taking advantage of those and turning those into a biofuel that can then be used to reduce additive GHG emissions from our vehicles. I think we're going to need more of it in the long term.
Well, we've been very proud to partner with Pepsi. I mentioned earlier, PepsiCo has joined Clean Fuels as an organization, and we're working collaboratively, on these issues, both technical, regulatory, and even to some degree political. It's not my realm, but it's something we all have to deal with. And so we're huge proponents of the open markets and that the industry will figure this out. But are there additional challenges, that Pepsi's looking at? Are there markets better suited than others, even on a global scale? I mean, I would imagine you guys are having to look at not just regulations and legislation here in the U.S. and the rest of North America, but throughout the world, because you are a global commodity and brand.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So it's with a lot of the regulations and markets going on today, there's a lot of change going on in the industry. Some of it's been proposed regulations, some of it has been finalized regulations, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. So for us, we're obviously going to stay focused on what is required to be in compliance. We're going to make sure we can meet those regulatory requirements, whether it's zero emission vehicles or reductions in carbon. And that might be, different geographies within the U.S., whether it's some of the states that have adopted ACT or ACF or CARB emissions. We're staying close to what EPA is doing with GHG Phase 3, as well as globally what other markets are doing as well. And I think globally we're going to find different solutions too. In certain parts of the world, there's access to biofuels that are more readily available and have lower CIs. And then in some parts of the world, there aren't. In some parts of the world, there's access to renewable electricity. In others, it's more challenging. So I think it's going to be a top-down approach from looking at multiple solutions and finding the correct solution for the application. And then as well as finding those low carbon energies, which I think will vary from market to market. So it really is today, it's focused on what is available and continuing to make progress, and then keeping an eye on the future and continue to test and push the limits of where we are today and watch out for emerging technologies that could influence or change that strategy.
Yeah, hopefully the work that we're doing and sharing with you and some of your additional OEM partners will help bring about some of those changes, some of those solutions that you can carry from the U.S. market to other parts of the world. It sounds like our message that biofuels are essential for America's farms and food security, can almost say, and for, low carbon markets as they emerge around the world. Pepsi's got a great message to share. There are so many things that people don't understand from the surface. Every time you walk into that convenience store or your grocery store and grab a case of Pepsi and a bag of Frito-Lay chips, all of the other work that goes behind that. Tell our listeners, kind of wrap up this message with a bow, everything you guys are doing to become a better company.
So it really starts with PepsiCo Positive. So it's really where we want to be as a company in the future, focusing on that positive agriculture, positive value chain, and positive choices. So that influences our impact on climate, our water use, our packaging, as well as our products, and then our impact on agriculture too. So when we combine those three pillars of PepsiCo Positive together, that's really the overall strategy of where we want to be in the future. And then today, when we look at our existing fleet, it's leveraging those type of initiatives in a low carbon, more sustainable operation that help us get our products to market, having a lower carbon impact, and doing it in a more responsible way that our consumers and our employees are expecting out of us.
Adam, thanks for taking time to sit down with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really looking forward to seeing you next week at Farm Progress in Iowa and helping share our collective message with the industry.
Looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
All right, Adam, Scott, thank you. That's it for this week's episode. If you enjoy the podcast and you've got a moment, it really does help us if you give us a rating. It helps us grow and get more awareness. And if you really want to go for it, just leave us a review. We might just read it here. You can do that wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have a question for our experts or a suggestion for a future topic or guest, you can email us at podcasts@cleanfuels.org. And join us next week for our very first mailbag episode as we address and answer some of our listener questions and comments. That's next week on another episode of the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. To catch all the latest from Clean Fuels Alliance America, follow us at cleanfuels.org. The Better, Cleaner, Now podcast is a production of Clean Fuels Alliance America. That's all for us. Now it's your turn to be better, cleaner, now.